The NRL has itself a milking problem. Not that. Getting closer? Colder now.
I just stood there, I didn't do anything, I didn't lay down, I got up on my knee and...
There we go. At this point, at least 2 to 3 times in every game, a player disrupts the flow of the game because he thinks a penalty occurred on a tackle. It sucks, and everyone seems to agree that this sucks. Yet, no one has any solutions for it. There are complaints and talks and opinions, but no actions. That doesn't make a lot of sense because this kind of seems like an easy problem to solve. I'm Cheyenne Hollis, this is The Touchback, and here is how you can fix the NRL's milking problem.
Milk was a bad choice.
Firstly, I understand that milking covers a lot of different ways that players try to get a ref to call a penalty. I also know that Harry Grant was called for milking in the Storm's win over the Warriors earlier this season. What I'm focused on here are those instances when a player stays down after a tackle in hopes of getting the video official to review the play and call a penalty. In some of these cases, a penalty does happen. Other times, there are no penalties, and the player just has to get up and play the ball. The problem is that rugby league is a sport dependent upon flow and not stopping the play. Milking is the most disruptive act imaginable. It kind of ruins rugby league at its core. That being said, if a player is truly injured, I don't want them forcing themselves to get up. That brings us to why milking is kind of a big problem. It's all reward and no risk. There's legitimately no downside to staying down after a tackle if they think there's the slightest chance a penalty occurred. At the very worst, you're just playing the ball where you would have played it anyway. I don't understand why this is being tolerated. No one seems to understand why this sort of milking is tolerated. Now, there is one thing I did notice when researching and looking at this. Milking is by no means a new problem in rugby league throughout the history of Australia, and Super League as well. Really, everywhere you go, rugby league players have been milking. Taking dives and trying to draw these penalties has happened for decades now. However, in the modern era, in the 2020s especially, it is just taking on a life of its own, especially when you have the bunker and its abilities to review any sort of head contact or crusher tackles. The one thing I have noticed, though, is that when anyone suggests a way to eliminate milking, they almost always take it to the absolute extreme. For example, Cronk and James Graham want to see players sin binned for milking. That is absurd. It is the equivalent to finding ants in your house and then shooting a Scud missile at it to get rid of them. Also, why is the only highlight ever shown of James Graham during his playing career on Fox League happen to be him just drenched in I digress though. Elsewhere, Raiders coach Ricky Stewart has suggested creating a crusher tackle assessment that would operate basically in line with what we see for HIAs. That doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense because it doesn't address what happens when no penalty occurs or when someone is milking. Rugby league journalist Michael Carayannis has proposed that a potentially injured player or someone who can't play the ball, I guess, be sent off the field for assessment and replaced. This, of course, would just be exploited by teams wanting to make more interchanges. It's solving one problem in milking while creating a totally new one. Former Gold Coast Titans head man and current Sydney Roosters assistant coach Justin Holbrook has said he would like to see a similar system to the Super League. There, everything that is not a sin binning is basically ignored. The idea this is going to stamp out milking in the NRL, though, it feels hopelessly optimistic at best. So here we are with a rather large milking problem and nary a solution in sight. When you look at what other sports do across the world, the NFL sort of stands out to me.
That's a personal foul on the kicker for trying to draw a penalty.
They, of course, have always had a problem with players trying to fake injuries to try and stop the clock. To make sure that doesn't happen, they enacted rules that state a player who is injured within the final 2 minutes of a half and cannot get off the field is forced to use a timeout. And should a team not have a timeout at their disposal, then they are then assessed a 5-yard penalty and there will be a 10-second runoff from the game clock. The rule itself is not applicable to the NRL. Obviously, NFL, two wildly different sports doing wildly different things. To me, though, the important part of this is the spirit of the rule and how it is trying to address a problem. In order to find a good balance, in order to make sure something doesn't happen, it has removed the benefit of faking an injury to stop the clock, but done so in a way that feels balanced. The question here now becomes, how can the NRL create a deterrent to milking that doesn't threaten player safety? I believe I have a solution. It's a two-part solution, but the second part of the solution isn't really necessary, and I'm just going to get yelled at by traditionalists and purists who say rugby league cannot handle such a thing. Still going to throw it out there though. Anyway, here is how you can fix milking in the NRL. First, any player who is unable to play the ball after a completed tackle in a situation to have not been deemed a penalty must leave the field of play for 6 tackles or until the next stoppage, whatever comes first. This is not an interchange or a replacement. The team will play a man down for those 6 tackles or whenever the next stoppage of play happens to be. A team could hypothetically use one of their 8 interchanges to replace the injured player should they wish to do so. And of course, if the play was actually a penalty, then the player can stay on the field. The 6 tackle duration for this I know is going to raise some eyebrows, so I want to explain a little bit my logic behind it. At first I thought about removing the player from the field until the end of the current set, but if it's tackle 5 or 6, there really isn't much of a deterrent. I also thought about making the benching time-based, maybe have the player sit out for 1 or 2 minutes, but it just feels a little too restrictive because a lot can happen in a minute or two of a rugby league game. Ultimately, 6 tackles is a chunk of action, but not an overly burdensome situation. It simply gives players a reason to think twice about milking without forcing them to play through clear penalties. Obviously, you know if you got hit in the head, and if you aren't sure that you got hit in the head, maybe you thought it was the neck or the chest or whatever the case may be, well, having to sit out for 6 tackles, it's something. You've created a risk and reward by not playing the ball immediately, and that's something we just do not see in the current setup. The second thing I'd like to see happen, and the thing I know, look, some of you are going to say I'm a stupid American, I shouldn't talk about rugby league, this, that, and the other. Go wild with it, knock yourself out, I don't care. But the second thing I would like to see happen is for the ball to be moved back, the next play of the ball to be moved back if a player is found to have milked. Move the ball back by 10 meters, 20 meters, even create a sense of loss for the attacking team. It boggles my mind that there's no punishment for the attacking team should one of their players to have been found to milk. But if you move the ball back by 10 yards, if you're on your own 20-meter line and you're going back to the 10-meter line, that's kind of a big deal here. And it could be just, again, another deterrent to stop guys from milking. And again, to me, it's all about striking that balance. It's an extra level of punishment, but it's not an out-and-out penalty. You're not doing anything that's particularly harsh on the other team, but it's something that will make them think what they are doing here. Look, I understand yardage penalties are not a rugby league thing. I know 100% why you purists and your traditionalists hate this idea. But for me, it's just something to consider, something to put out there if you're really serious about trying to stop milking in the game. There you have it, a straightforward way to reduce milking in the NRL without dropping the atomic fly swatter on the entire sport. A deterrent where none exists, adding some risk to a scenario that is currently all reward. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to know a little bit more about why me, an American, is a pretty big fan of Leichhardt Oval in Belmar, well, check out the video in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Until next time, I'm Cheyenne Hollis. This is The Touchback, and hashtag take it out to the 25.
It's so damn hot. Milk was a bad choice.